almost done with this metric build on all the heavy construction part. We're down to the wiring, and I've got wiring run, already got the coil, the MSD box in and stuff, and we're going to jump into the episode here where we're going to figure out how to lay the dash out, and I want to show y'all how I go about wiring up everything on a street stock. This is the Dominator race products. This is the fiberglass one. They've got this one that's got like the flat with the two angles that's fiberglass, and then I think they've got one that's in that ABS type plastic material that's like more rounded, like that more modern look you see in some of the street stocks as well. I went with this one here. We've already fitted it. You see it's already been cut, relieved, and it's ready to go. And I've got some gauges that I pulled out of the crush. 2-inch gauges for oil and water. These are digitals. I like these because you just run a wire to the engine. It's a lot easier. I'll put a link to these on my website, dirtracelife.com. This is just Amazon stuff here. And A to Z, Billy Sturgill bought us a Longacre tachometer. I needed a better tachometer. I had one in that other car that was absolute junk. Billy bought this for us. Thank you, Billy. I appreciate that, buddy. Well, it's too late now for one to move them because I got holes there. Okay. These are just real simple to do. Move this out of the way. You get over here for a minute. Oh, I'll be itching for these days over, I guarantee it. Oh, which do we put on left? Which oil and water or water and oil? I'm going to say oil and water. Never had a dashboard like this before. Everything I've had has always been home built. Y'all, I home built everything, y'all. But the way this car was and stuff, I was like, you know, sure would make it easier if I just had me some kind of dash I could pull out and have in there. Mr. Bentley, I really appreciate it. He did give us a sponsorship on this at Dominator Race Products. I love their products. It is very appreciated, y'all. If you have not purchased any of the Dominator Race products before, check them out, dominatorraceproducts.com. And he makes some great stuff. I'm going to put the main shutoff right here in that spot. I want it right there. I want it where I can reach in, or anybody else can reach in. It's right here on this side. This is a lot beefier unit. I was running the real cheap ones, and I got a buddy of mine, David Cove, David's Diesel Parts in Ripley, Tennessee, and I asked him, and he got me, this is one of these, it's got some crazy surge amp rating, you know, like guaranteed to disconnect, it's not going to hang up. You know, this is stuff that you can put like on big trucks. I'll put David's phone number for David's Diesel Parts. I'll put it in the description as well. So if you need some heavy duty stuff like that, or if you're in trucking, give him a call. Check him out. All right, what's next? Tachyometer. Put this drill bit up. And let's see, I think it's, yeah, two and a half, I think. Yep, that's the right one. Should be done with that hole saw there. Is it flush? Yeah, it's flush. Yeah. Okay, that looks good. Unwire this. I've got some switches, and the way I've got these, I went ahead and made them up. So like, you'll see I've got my circuit breaker and then I've got my switch. And so I went ahead and made those up. I'm gonna put them together. And I ran the wires best I could, the ones I could figure out. We'll figure the rest out together. But I've got ignition, and I have got a blower, and I have got brakes here. And that is it, I think. So the way I'm going to do these, I want to put my ignition switch over here on this left side, because I want to be able to reach in and start the car, like say work the throttle and be outside of it. The other one, I had put it on the right side, which worked fine in the car, but it made me have to reach way over in here trying to start the car up, and I couldn't, like, say, grab the linkage on the throttle, you know, if it was cold, to get it cranked at the same time. So it made kind of a pain in the tail. So we're going to put the starter button and the ignition switch right over here. We're going to put them out on the edge where they're out of the way, where my hand's on the steering wheel. I'm not going to hit them. I don't want them right in here. I want them out here on this edge. So I'm going to drill some holes and throw those in right quick. And I want my starter up top with my switch down below. That way I can take my thumb and push in on the starter and then flip the switch up to crank it or down. Oh, I didn't show y'all that. So the way I do these switches, I use a double pole switch where you're hot in the middle and then it's on up or on down. I've been doing that because I had a switch burn out on me one time, and this is real easy to do when you're running HEI ignition because you're running all your amperage through your switch on HEI ignition. That's what it did on me. I burnt the contact out and put me out of a race I was doing really well in, and so that aggravated me. So from then on, I always run a double pole, and if the car quits for any reason, first thing I can do is just flip that switch the other direction. So if I burn a contact right there, I'm covered until I can replace the switch. So it's just something I did for redundancy to try to never have that happen again. It doesn't cost a bit more to buy a double pole switch. I buy all double pole switches now. So I'm going to put this in right. Alright. Alright. So there's that. Okay. That side's done. I'll show y'all how I'm going to wire this up in a minute. Look at this other side. I'll put my brake switch. I'll put my brakes in. That is my helmet. This is my brakes. So get these drilled out right quick and we'll throw those in. So this brake switch right here is an intermediary down, and then it stays on up. And the reason I'm doing that is because that way I can just pull down on it and try it out, and if I like it, I can leave it on. Just something I thought, you know, why not? Do it like that right there. I don't like using a right front brake cutoff, but you better have it available because sometimes you can get jammed up and it can save your bacon. I went ahead and put the rest of the switches in here. So got ignition, starter. All right, so I got a relay here that I'm gonna run my starter with, and then I've got a relay that's for the main MSD box, then I've got a relay for the ignition switch. That little green light right there, that's for when I turn my ignition switch on, so I'll know it's on when I turn that on. And then of course I got my gauges here, and then I've got, this one is my brake, and I've got it's intermediary down, so I can just lean down on it to check, say going through a corner and check, see how that works. If I like it, I can flip it up and leave it on. I put a red light on that where I won't forget that I've got my brake turned on to cut that right front off. And then that's my blower with high and low, up and down right there. Those are the relays for those. Wiring wise, the way this works, it becomes a rat's nest really quick. But basically what I do is my hot's gonna come in right here and then turn around, and when I turn the master on, then I'm gonna light up a big main trunk line right here. And of course, I'll also have a big line coming off this going to the solenoid, but this main line right here has got feeders that feed all my relays. So everything's going to a relay, I say relay, breaker, excuse me. But anyway, then I've got like a 30 right there that's gonna run the MSD box. Then I've got a 20 right here that my starter's on, and I've got a 15 right here that the ignition line of the MSD box is on. And then you can see where that I've got lines coming around to my switches for them. And then over here, the same deal. I've got a main feeder line running in these two breakers right here. I think I've got a 5 amp running the brakes, the right front brake cutoffs on a 5 amp. And then my blower for my helmet is on a 10 amp right there. And then you see these small lines where that I'm running that light to know when that brake is turned on. There's my line coming out to turn the brakes on. Here are the 2 screws where the blower lines are going to connect on. And then I've got My tachometer, I have a ground wire. So that's a ground wire right there that is grounding those two lights as well and coming out to ground for the tachometer. And then here is my signal line for my tachometer, and then my power line here is coming back, and I'm hooking my gauges in on this 20 up here with a starter. I'm just gonna run my gauges from it. So yeah, it's a rat's nest, but that's, like I said, try to get all of it I can just in the dash. That way, like, we could just pull the dash out if we had to, like, change gauges out or do something here, is the way it is with the least number of wires to it. So, there it is. Let's put it in real quick. Hey, I'm going to cut the video right here because I want to show y'all this like a schematic on the dry erase board. That way, anybody just starting out, you can kind of see how this works. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to draw it out, and we'll do it like as simple as possible, and then we'll add on things to show like how it gets more complex and how you would go about doing that. We're going to start with a battery, okay? So 12-volt battery. All right, first thing I'm going to say right here, where we go to ground with that battery, I like to ground to the frame itself, and then I like to run a ground line all the way to the engine, either to the mid plate, if you've got a mid plate, you know, onto one of the bolts actually on the back of the block, you know, or like one of the intake bolts, but like actually bolted to the engine. And, you know, everything's mounted solid and stuff, but it just removes all doubt about you having a solid ground to your engine itself, for your starter, for your distributor, for everything, all right? So, ground on the battery. Then turn around, and the main line coming off the hot on the battery is going one place. You're going to have a master disconnect, okay? So you're going to come right there to your master disconnect. So when I flip the master disconnect off, I'm disconnecting that battery in its entirety. All right? You got a big cable that's going to come off your master disconnect. On the other side, this is the one you're controlling with the switch to turn it on and off. That is going to go into your solenoid. All right? So your starter solenoid you're going to run is a remote starter solenoid. Okay? And so you got a line coming in there. You know, you've got a big one in and a big one out, and then you'll have two little ones, all right? Now, one of those little ones, and this is if you get a four-pole solenoid. Most all your heavy-duty solenoids, they're going to be a four-pole. Going to have two great big poles and two little poles, all right? Doesn't actually matter. Most of them won't have markings on the two big poles. Doesn't matter which side you put which big cable, all right? Let me go ahead and point out right here. The one that will be the ground small pole will have an I, and the one that is actually to start to turn the solenoid on will have an S. All right, so you'll have an S and an I marked on top of this solenoid. That I right there, that goes to ground. You can actually just connect it to the bolt on the solenoid, provided you got your solenoid bolted down to a good clean ground, you know, on the frame somewhere. Something that you know is grounded. If it's questionable how you got it bolted, make sure you bolt it to a good ground on the frame somewhere. All right? Now, what that does, when you hit your push button, when you go to make this solenoid right here connect across, well, that energizing power that comes in, it has to hit a ground somewhere. And the reason that that's on a separate pole like that is because, like a solenoid on a car, like, you know, the clutch pedal where you have to push the clutch in to start the engine, or you have to have the car in park before you can start the engine. Well, that's what that pole did. It was like when you did those things, that's what would make that ground, okay? So that's all that's going on right there. So you're just going to take and just put it to ground, period. All right? So now, we're to the solenoid. We're coming out of the solenoid, and we're going to go to the starter itself, all right? So we got a big old starter that we're going to go to that's on the engine. And the important point, you're going to have a solenoid on the starter, okay, that has this part in it. You're just going to connect it together is all you're going to do. Let me show you right quick what that looks like so there's no doubt. We're going to look at the starter from the back. Big solenoid on it, right? Got two big poles and a little pole, all right? And got a big pole on it. And here's what you'll see. You're going to see that there is this big copper line, and it may be shielded, it may not, that just goes from one pole to the starter itself, and then you connect on to that other pole that's got a nut there. That's where you connect on, so that's you connecting to it. That little one right there, that is the same as that pole right there. But you're going to use a remote because you don't want your solenoid to be in that heat dealing with that. And not only that, if you use this pole as your starter solenoid, that means you've got a hot line always running up into your engine bay. Like this would always be hot when your master was on. And like you got headers, you got things that could like melt that and ground out, and short out, and cause fires and all kind of stuff. Well, for all of those reasons, what you're going to do is you're going to run a jumper wire. So you're going to make you a little wire and you're going to jump from here to here. So you're going to use like a big hole on the lug to go over that one, and then a crimp-on with a small hole and a little piece of wire. It can be 10 or 12 gauge. You could use 14 gauge. That would be fine. Nothing any smaller than 14 gauge, okay? For this wire right here, the wire itself only has got to be like 2 or 3 inches long. But it's important that jumper wire from that small pole, it goes to the big pole that you connect onto. All right, that's the one. Because when you energize this, what you're doing is you're jumping and energizing that small solenoid as well. So when you turn it on the solenoid you've got remotely mounted on your firewall, that one will energize the second the power goes to it. So it just acts like it's not there. It's important to do it like this. Please make sure you do this. Race cars should not use the solenoid on the starter itself if you can keep from it. All right, so showed that right quick. Let me get you out of the way. All right, so we're connected up, right? Now, that will turn the starter over. Just doing that. Turn the switch on here, and if I energize this pole, well, how am I going to energize that pole right there? Okay, that's where we talk about on the side that your switch would turn on this side, you're going to run a leg out, and this is how you're going to run everything else, okay? So like, for example, I'm going to run, I want to be able to hit the starter button, make the starter crank over, so I need to energize that. Okay, so this is going to go through a switch and then, you know, to that point. So that would be like a push button switch I've got to push button. Me, I like to put a circuit breaker in right here. That circuit breaker for that switch, 15 or 20 amps is more than enough. Probably 5 amps would be fine, but I think right here I put a 20 on that is what I put, because I had like 5 breakers and I just went through and just picked the sizes. But anything more than 10 would be, you know, that would be fine. You don't want to use a fuse or breaker that's way bigger than what your wires are and stuff. So if you got a short, you would actually melt out and start a fire. That's kind of a rule of thumb. So for example, if I was using 16 or 18 gauge wire, like little speaker wire, well, you don't put a 30 or 40 amp fuse on that, because that fuse will stay intact and it will melt that wire down before the fuse would blow. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on, and you can look at, like, everything will tell you what its load, what it needs. So if it tells you it needs 5 amps here, put a 10 in, you're good to go. All right, so I like circuit breakers. I put a 20 right here. You put it in front of the switch right there. So like, I've got a line coming off this into a circuit breaker. It could be a fuse block holder. It could be one of those little spade block holders, but that's fine, either one. And runs that switch. Okay, so now I got a push button. I can start the car, right? Okay, but I need to run my ignition system. Okay, so let me clean this up just a little bit. We're getting messy. All right, I got another service line, right? I'm gonna run through a breaker or fuse, and I'm gonna turn around, and now I'm gonna go to my MSD ignition, and I've got, like on an MSD box, you've got 2 big lines. I have MSD power, right? All right, so the way I do this on the MSD power, I put a 30 on that. That's the big red line on the MSD box, and then turn around and I will run another one that only needs about a 10 is all it needs. And then that one I'm gonna put through a toggle switch, right? And that's gonna be my MSD, and we'll just say ignition switch, okay? That's a big red line, that's a small red line, okay, on an MSD box. All right, y'all got it? So like this one, when I turn that master on, I'm energizing the MSD box, but like if I crank the car over, it wouldn't start. It's just that I've got power to the MSD box. It has its own light switch that actually turns the MSD box on and off as far as like firing the car up, all right? So that's the way I do that right there. If I just had an HEI, then that 30 amp, I would put a switch right here, and this would run the HEI, and this other one would not exist, okay? So like that one would be gone, and this would be that big red line that would go into our HEI on. Only thing I'm gonna say on an HEI like this, you're pulling a lot more amps through your actual switch line. Just make sure that you're using a good toggle switch that's rated for at least 30 amps. So when you see one that just says 250 volt, that has nothing to do with the load that it will carry. You're looking for one that can carry load, like at least 30 amps through that actual switch. All right, so now we've got power, so we can hit the push button and we can crank it. We can turn the switch on where we got ignition. This runs. This is bare minimum right here, this runs. Now, what if we want to run other stuff? Well, everything for me, I continue to run off this side. So for example, a 5 amp user circuit breaker for any gauges. I would run a separate line for like a helmet blower. I make sure the first thing that line hits is the breaker. All right, I don't want a lot of electronics and a lot of connections that aren't on the breaker. I got one line coming to the breaker itself. So if I have things short out, I got all of these connections and something gets grounded out, I want to make sure that that breaker is catching that, all right? Otherwise, you're going to melt things down because your breaker's on the other side of it. One other big question that comes up, if I put a charging system on this car, where do I connect it? Well, we're only going to talk about a single wire alternator because anything aftermarket you buy, it's going to be a single wire. So if I put a single wire alternator on this engine, okay, that one wire, when this alternator is spinning, it's going to produce 13.6 volts more than likely. Some of them produce more, but somewhere between 13.6, 13.8, 13.9, on a load, it's going to push your battery up 13.2, 13.3. All right, so it's producing that voltage. If I connect on to this side of this master disconnect, then in a panic situation, someone else reaching in the car to cut the power off or whatever, this master disconnect, when they flip the switch on it, it's not going to cut the engine off because this alternator is going to continue to keep this circuit energized. You can't do that. You have to come to this side. Now, you've got people that will say, okay, that's going to run your battery down. Now, I'm going to tell you, if that alternator runs your battery down, the diode in that alternator is bad. They have a one-way diode that is in them. It's actually in a little block right here. But there's a diode. Now, what a diode is it lets the power go one way but not the other. Okay? If it's working correctly, you put it on that side. It's hooked up to your battery all the time. It will not run the battery down. If it runs the battery down, if you show load and it's draining your battery, then the alternator itself, the diode has went bad in the alternator. Or something even worse than that. It's got a short in it or something like that. But the point being, put your alternator over there. Okay, is that a fully complex system? Yes, that is a fully complex system. This is literally, well, I don't run an alternator because I don't need it. But otherwise, this is actually what we're doing. Back to the video. All right, so this one is my main line coming in. So it will be by itself. It is extra long. I'm just going to take a zip tie when I get done and just zip tie it up. And this is massive cable. This is some really big welding cable is what that is. It's like an industrial level. I got somewhere years ago. Okay, that's done. And then turn around. There's my one going to the solenoid. I'm gonna come just like that. Was a little shorter right there. Go ahead and get you started. Okay, there's that. And then the rest of them I think I can connect after I get it in here. So drop you back in here. it. You go right there. Got my MSD box right there. And the MSD box has got two big hot wires. It's got a thicker one that's your main line. That's the one that actually carries, that's the one running your coil, producing all the power and everything. And so that one's going into a 30-amp breaker right there. This is my starter. That goes to my solenoid, so that's to the push button. So I'm gonna come right through here like this. And then my solenoid, let's see, got a big heavy duty solenoid right here. So that's on the starter side of it. Let me get this round right here. Come here, guys. All right. All right, so this is my ground wire right here. Took from my tachometer and my light bulbs in there. And then, let's see, blue line is my water right there, so I know that's water, so I need to plug these in. So, that goes into that gauge, and that goes into that gauge. And, oh, tachometer right here. I don't want no splice on that tachometer line. And tachometers can act a little funny, so I'm going to just solder this. See if I can get them two to... There we go. Okay. Tachometer connected. It's all hooked up. Let's hook the battery cable up and see what she does. There we go. All right. Gauge is lighted up when the power comes on. There's the green light there. MSD box. Yep, red light's on. Well, I hear my right front brake shut off clicking, but my little LED is not lit up. I don't know why my little LED is not lit up. I've already primed the fuel system and everything. So, we out of gear? Yep, we're out of gear. Come on, Bessie. My ground wire for my light on my brakes and from my tachometer there inside that butt splice connector had pulled back. It wasn't connected. Found it, fixed it, done. Now I'm just going to take zip ties and like these big cables here, I'm just going to zip tie them up underneath the dashboard here. I'm leaving them long, that way that dash, I got room to like pull it away, work on it, you know, whatever. When I put the decking piece on, I'm going to drill a 1/4-inch hole all the way through the decking, through this, and bolt that all together as one unit. So I just put a pair of vice grips on it for right now. I'm going to be doing decking tonight on this car. Let's see, and I'll zip tie all of this stuff up. Something else I wanted to show y'all right quick. So in the past, I had put the throttle stop underneath the gas pedal in the driver's compartment. And it was really going to be a pain in the tail to do it on this car, where that I had still to like weld something on and adjust it, and I'm not planning on having it like this area here. I'm just going to close up because I've got access to it from underneath, and then also being able to pull that dashboard out as well. And I got to thinking about how else could I do a throttle stop, and I came up with something, and I think this is pretty nifty, and I think this might be an easy way for anybody to do it. So I had an extra piece of cable here, and I'll tell you what that right there is, that cable. That's off of an enclosed trailer door. So that's like that 5/32 cable, and it had an end crimped on it. But you can go to a Tractor Supply or any hardware store and just get a piece of cable and get you a crimp-on end. But it had a crimp-on end with like an eyelet right there. And what I did was, I took in the top hole in my throttle arm right here, I drilled it through 3/8. And then I took a 3/8 bolt and I drilled a 5/32 hole through that 3/8 bolt. I think it was 5/32 hole. Through that 3/8 bolt right there, I bolted it on, and I took and I welded a nut where that this cable would go through that nut right there and stop. So that's a hard stop. And then I took and put 2 nuts where I drilled that hole through that bolt for a pinch. And then I just turned around, held the throttle down on the floor, and, you know, like got it like pinned down all the way with the throttle pulled all the way back. And then I turned around and I just adjusted back until I closed it up and got that pressure off of the hard stop on the carburetor. And I just locked that joker down. And of course, I got the carburetor primed and everything now, so I'm not going to sit here and pump it. But basically, it just pulls tight. And when it pulls tight, it's just right before the blade's actually hard stopping. They'll actually go past wide open and hard stop. So they get right to wide open. And there's no power right there in that last little bit, y'all. That's a waste of time trying to get a blade to be like exactly perfectly straight up and down. I can tell you. You're not going to notice it on the track. But that's what I did, and it's adjustable if I need to adjust it. I like this because the way that it is, if it fails, it fails towards not being able to pull the throttle. If something got up in here and hung this or anything, it doesn't pull the throttle open. It would keep you from opening it. So I like the idea of this right here. So like, for example, if something was to like get up under the car and get in here or something, it doesn't pinch the throttle open. It would keep you from opening the throttle. So I feel like that's a safe way to do it. And like if I had put a solid rod like going through there with a stop or something, well then that rod could hang. But see, because this is flexible, then it's not going to ever push the throttle open. I like it. I think that may be the way I do these from now on because, buddy, it was quick. I had this thing knocked out in about 10 minutes flat. Man, I am wrapping up on this video right here. Make sure you're subscribed. I'm going to start throwing some decking on this car because we have got to get a hold of Extreme Concepts. They have got our wrap ready to be printed. He just needs dimensions and said put the metal on before I print this thing where we can get it right. So that's all coming up in the next episode. See y'all next time.